Awesome. Rory, super excited to chat. We've known each other for a long time, and of course, I've always known you're a killer coach. You got a great program. I always hear amazing things. Let's just hop right in. I know being straight blast, you guys have always been on the aliveness front, so of course, getting even more alive. I don't know if that's a word or a phrase, but it's just interesting. I'd really love to know sort of what's your room look like these days for your grappling training, let's say in your grappling program? What type of things are you working on? What's working, what's not working? Just anywhere you want to start. Let's go.
Awesome. Well, first of all, Kabir, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure. I enjoyed listening to your talk with my brother, and I've some of the other ones, some of the other folks you've had on. Uh, so I guess we're talking mostly BJJ today, or coaching in general. And I want to say this experiment in constraints-led approach and ecological dynamics and whatever the other words are in the jargon that I don't necessarily jump into as much as my brother does. But we've been doing this experiment for like the last year or so, at least in this way. I know you mentioned aliveness, and I've always felt that our room has been alive. It's a big thing that Matt pushed for years and still pushes to this day. But I think the difference now in focusing more on not techniques, but getting people to focus on how to develop their own jujitsu, as opposed to this is how you do this and I do this and you do that, and here's this 5 or 10 step process to this move. I think the CLA, the constraints-led approach, has really allowed people to do what we've always wanted them to do, which is develop their own jujitsu. And we just made our 21st black belts. We had 3 new black belts on Sunday, and one of those guys was in his 50s. One of them, his son was 22. Another one in the room was 20, maybe mid 20s, working on a PhD. And they have all developed their own jiu-jitsu over the years, even prior to this. Obviously, they didn't get a black belt in a year, but they all play different games, and they all come to their jiu-jitsu with their own health issues and physicalities. And I think this here develops so much of how you play and what you like. Gabriel attacks the feet a lot, but is also a fantastic wrestler, and he's big. And even though he's 150 something pounds, he's an ox in a weight room. His dad, who's in his 50s, has his physical limitations and plays a half guard game a lot of the time. And then Terry, who's maybe mid-20s, working on his PhD, he loves taking the back and rolling through positions and grabbing gis and doing things that really we just don't, even up until this last year, just didn't really spend a lot of time on. We don't focus on really playing with the gi. We bring it into the game every now and again so that people who like to compete know that, hey, people are gonna grab your gi and they're not gonna let go. People are gonna grab your gi, and these are the things that they're gonna do, but don't necessarily play a gi-based game, so that when the gi comes off, and we do a lot of MMA and still do no gi, when the gi comes off, you are not like, how do I do jiu-jitsu? But I think in the last year, really kind of running with things the way we have, and I find that people are really coming to their own conclusions, probably more so than in a room where I dictate this is how you need to do jiu-jitsu. This is how the techniques work, and if I do this, you do this. We never really liked that all that much, but we probably still had a little bit more of, what would you say, IP or PI? I'm not sure which way that goes. Uh, uh, in the past than we do now. It's very limited now, but yet it doesn't seem to have affected the abilities of my students, and I see them doing some really good things, and you see them pulling things out that they just find on their own. I enjoy it a lot more. It's harder to coach, but I believe it's more of what I'm supposed to be doing as a coach than just sitting at the front and instructing people on, this is the way. Where this is I'm not Boba Fett. This is not the way.
Yeah, for sure, man. Very interesting. I see a lot of the same things with people just doing stuff that I don't do or my other coaches just don't do. One thing you mentioned is that it's harder to coach. What does that mean to you? Like, what do you find is the challenge there or the new challenge there?
Well, if I'm supposed to be a conduit to the fundamentals, right? I feel like that's, again, we did a lot of that. So this is for us, and Adam just taught a brand new coaching course. You know, we do 1 or 2 coaching courses every year, and he tore the old one down, and it's 80% new stuff. So if I'm as a coach a conduit to the fundamentals, so that you understand what you're supposed to be doing on the base level, and then build your game on that, then I find that it's much easier for me to say, hey, this is the triangle, grab these 2 hands, shove this one through, put your foot on the hip here, turn this angle, don't be a nose doctor, be an ear doctor, lock this up, triangle. And then my partner is going to sort of allow me to triangle them. So yeah, I've learned a technique called the triangle choke, but did I really learn how to find it, how to adjust when I've got a partner whose neck is this big, or adjust when my partner is much smaller, and all the things that we know that we have to adjust to finish a triangle. But really, the most important part of a triangle is one arm in, one arm out. So as a coach now, I've got to develop ways or develop drills. I know drill is a faux pas in this world, but a game, a drill, I've got to develop something that allows my students to recognize that the important part of it is one arm in, one arm out, and put your foot underneath your knee. Now, we would say that's an invariant. So I could start at the end and work my way back and try and help them find their way to that position where they're trying to squeeze a neck and cut off carotid arteries. That is, to me, harder than saying, this is how you do a triangle. And these are all the steps that go into a triangle, and then just saying, okay, now go triangle choke someone. And they don't really own that yet, as opposed to working them from the end back to a beginning state where they know what it's supposed to look like, but don't necessarily know all the mechanics of how to get there, and then setting up the games or the drills to have them work to try and find those positions on their own, I find is harder than just, I'm not so bad at a triangle choke. We joke around in the gym that I've got a record in the UFC that's held up now for 17 years. I know how to triangle choke people, but I'm also 6'2.5" and been doing it for 30 years. Not everybody in my room can do a triangle choke the way I do a triangle choke, but if I say this is what it needs to look like at the end, become effective at it, and then over time we can sort of help to dial in, once they find that effectiveness, we can help to dial in their efficiency, then that is harder to figure out, I think, than just, this is how I do something, now go do what I do. Good luck. Good luck being a 30-year-old, being a black belt for 30 years, 4th degree. Good luck. And I think, you see so much of that in other places, and I don't really think those people know how to grapple. They just know how to do a technique, but they don't really know how to grapple. And I think if that's the purpose of what we do as coaches, is to help people learn how to grapple, then teaching them a bunch of stuff that's not necessarily grappling is not helping them. We have failed. And again, we didn't do a lot of that, but we certainly taught some stuff from time to time, technique wise, and how to pivot on a hip, how to throw a leg over the head. Here's your triangle. Here's your arm bar. Here's your Kimura, things like that. And I don't do as much of that now. It's hard. It's hard coming from that to this, when it's so easy just to show people how to do things. Have you
Yeah,
found that?
but I
Have
mean,
you found that to be something, I said it, but I imagine you have found that to be similar.
oh, absolutely. I mean, it is. It's much easier, I would say. Easier in the sense of effort in to get something that looks like a result out. It's very easy for me to show you a thing, and then you can perform this thing. You can make the same shapes and the same things, but like as like good grappling is about the feel. What does that connection feel like? What are we actually doing to their body? So one of the most common things I hear from everyone I've pretty much literally talked to is that first step is like, oh, now you have to be able to reflect on what's actually happening, and that is the tough part, because that's what you want to emphasize. What are the non-negotiables of this position to make it work, to make it actually be challenging, because that's sometimes like something that people have a challenge with. I know even I do sometimes with getting my other coaches on board initially. It's like, I have to teach you to adopt a whole new lens on your grappling. Because hey, you guys are all effective grapplers. You can do it, but do you know what's really happening? And that's tricky. That's a tricky thing because coming up, no one really spoke to me about my grappling in that way. So then like now you have to deconstruct something to present it again, and then hope at the same time that you're going to design an activity that actually makes them see the thing that you think is so important. And that truly is challenging because what's easier in the world than pulling up my phone, going to YouTube and choosing a move, and I have a lesson plan for the week. People like, and it's not negative, let's say, but like people can literally just do that.
It is
There's
negative.
associations. Oh yes, I'm
It
just
is
trying to
negative.
be a nice
That's
man.
you're trying to. I get
You
it, but
know,
it is negative. It is, three
yeah.
techniques and go live has never been our MO, but that's still got to be 90% of it. I don't like to doom scroll, but spend a little time doom scrolling, and all you see is jujitsu kata or jujitsu ippon.
Mm-hmm.
I do this, you do this. There's the dead body, and we're just, as what was it? Bruce said, carving up a corpse, and so much of what people want these days, because it's out there everywhere, and following, follow counts and follow numbers and likes and shares just show you that people want to be spoon fed. I think we still did far less spoon feeding than a lot of other places, but we still did probably more of it than we certainly did more of it than we do now. But there's so much spoon feeding, and the spoon feeding doesn't make people good grapplers unless those people are also spending hours and hours doing jujitsu. Then over time, regardless of how people are learning, they're going to figure it out. But that's because they're in that environment that they're in, where they're grappling live, lends itself to sort of being constraints led. I mean, it is, you are doing the thing, but doing the thing from start to finish, I feel, is made people better sooner. I see it with my kids because we've been doing this with the kids for a while. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. But I see the frustration of students who started with us being a little bit more spoon-fed than now moving to this. And I think it's harder for students to sometimes adopt it than it has been for Adam or myself. It's certainly not easy for all my coaches because you're asking them to do something in a manner that I believe they might have been doing, but not like this, and then having to walk around a room, because you set something up, and then, I have to then, that's why I say the coaching's harder, because I have to see, are people doing this thing? Are they accomplishing the task? Maybe they're getting to the end and the goal is one, I land chest to chest, or I put them on their butt, I put them on their hands, or things of that nature, but are they getting there? Are they getting their A? And then are they getting there? And again, is it effective? Can I make it a little bit more efficient? Do I mess with people at all? Last night usually after belt ceremony, things are big, but last night there were 57 people on my mat for a Monday night jujitsu class. And having keeping eyes on all of that and being present to see, are people struggling with this concept? Are people struggling with how to, make and maintain these connections I'm asking them to, or people struggling with how to remove these connections. Like last week on Monday, I introduced a bunch of grips, and I wanted the bottom person, and I put them in grips, whether we call that lasso or spider, or just say, here, wrap up this way, because people will compete and people will do this to you. So I need to have this present in the room so that the people who do compete can not be, totally unaware, and then recognize at the same time that novel is still answered the same way. So these grips might be novel to you, but now how do you disengage? How do you break them? And we're doing that. We did, the bottom part of that last week, and this Monday we did the top part, so that people now can see, yeah, all these grips might be weird to you and people are holding on to things, but this is how I want you to think about addressing them by getting rid of hips and getting rid of grips and taking things out of your collar and be able to sit yourself upright so you can have access to your hands. Like, I didn't teach them anything. I just said, try and use your body to stay up So you can use your hands to access and break grips. And then we played some games where that's all they had to do. And then we played some games where they also then had to get chest to chest and start moving through like a passing situation. And that can be frustrating in the beginning if this is the first time people have seen this, and that can be frustrating as a coach because people might not be getting it. And then you've got to figure out, where did I fail? Where if I just say do steps 1 through 10, then I can just say, well, you're just not paying attention. I showed you how to do all 10 steps. How come you can't get a triangle? So that's why I think it's harder and more involved. I've removed myself in a way, but then I have to insert myself in a far more complicated task of making sure that what I did helps these people get better at jiu-jitsu, not get better at learning how to do a bunch of things and then have them spin through a Rolodex in their brain of moves.
Yeah. So, something else I think tied into that like for me is like, okay, so now I'm watching the room. You know, it's trickier for you to understand if you did a good job at your practice activity sort of design, because it's like, if they're not able to do the thing, is that a me thing? Is that a them thing? Does it matter if they're failing at all? Like, is it totally, awesome that they're failing? If they're failing, like that I think is also another thing, because when you're teaching like a more traditional way, if it looks like the right thing, you've nailed it, because everyone is sort of doing the thing. But now when you're looking at, let's say, a more like chaotic room, because everyone's trying different ways to make stuff happen, and some people are just going to fail, and it's like, ooh, is that me? Did I phrase my instruction in a weird way that made them not really pick up what I wanted them to pick up? Is it just that, like that I think is something I can not struggle with, but I can imagine, 'cause I don't really care. I'm down for the chaos, because I know it's like a cumulative process, right? All these experiences will compound, and then it's sort of it'll get into that target area over time of efficiency, of effectiveness, of all that stuff. But how do you think about that? Because I had this actually spawned by like a little comment that just like popped up on one of my YouTube things, which I never considered. And they're like, hey, I noticed that some of your students, they aren't even trying one of the win conditions that you had for the game, because there's like multiple things that would be a positive outcome for player A, and it's like it looks like they're forgetting about these other ones. And to me, I'm like, I never thought about that, because I don't care if they're doing all the wins. I just care that they're finding a win. I'm like, I don't know. I've never, like, is that yeah, I don't know. I would just love to know your thoughts on stuff like that. Like, that sort of evaluating what they're doing and it tying it into your design.
And you give variety. If I set up a game yesterday, I'll say game, since we're going to stick with sort of terminology as opposed to drill, because people don't like the word drill, although our drills have always been alive. The game I set up yesterday was we were focusing on a top person. Everything's always reciprocal. So I put the bottom person, first game was bottom person, you get a cross collar and you're fighting to try and put the other hand in while bringing them to your chest, however you can. If you finish, great. If you don't, I don't care. So higher level belts, if you want to play in there, just don't spend the whole freaking class just trying to finish that one collar choke. Top person, what I would like you to do is try and set up so that you're tall and they can't break you down, and you can then grip and try and break their grip. If you remove that grip, then you're good. So you've got to concern yourself with the second hand, but also you've got to concern yourself with taking this first hand out as they're trying to put you on their chest. So that's an easy one. They're going to break that grip or defend the second grip. Mm-hmm. Then we start getting into, a drill or a game where the bottom person, now you can become the top person. You can take their back, or you can submit them. So if I'm playing a game where that's one of the winning conditions, those aren't always going to present themselves. Only one of those may present themselves to a person. Whether it's focusing on a top or focusing on a bottom, not all of those winning conditions can always present themselves. So if they're winning with that partner this way, and then we come back to this in the future, and they're presented with those same winning conditions again in the future, then a different partner that they partner up with that day may present it that they might find the other winning conditions. I mean, we're going to do this if we're doing this for the rest of our lives, then at some point, if I see in a room people are winning in different ways, then I don't concern myself with the person who might only be winning in one way, as long as that person's winning, because who knows what their partner on the bottom is really capable of doing. So as long as there's winning going on, I don't necessarily know if I concern myself with, well, you haven't won this way. Because then I'm forcing the bottom person to sort of do something that might not necessarily be what they want to do. And now I'm starting to script things. And if we're trying to remove ourselves from scripting things as much as possible with this approach, then if I look around a room and everyone's having trouble, then yes, that's on me. Why can't I get anybody to focus their attention? I might not say it to them that way, but why is no one focusing their attention in such a manner? But if I give people ways to do things that are going to get them to the same end, and they just find their way to that same end each and every time, so be it. They're being effective, and eventually they're going to probably be pretty efficient at that. And then someone else is going to start doing something different. And then I've given them other options. And then hopefully one day they'll find those other options, and they'll start to recognize that all these paths lead to the same thing. And then over time, they're just going to force their way into one path, probably regardless, because that's sort of how we like to pass on this side instead of passing on that side. And this is how we like to end up, because this is the game we play and the submissions we're hunting and such. But one day that's not going to be available to them. And if I did my job over the course of the years, then they'll still have it in their head that there's another way. They'll recognize it because they focused on it. At some point, somebody did it that way, and they had to go that route regardless, because someone was good at defending that route. Or I know my training partner loves to do this, so I've got to be wary of that. And then that's going to leave open a different door. Because if we shut down one avenue, then something else should open up for us. And they're going to be doing it for years. And if they can go through years of never having accomplished one of the other tasks, then I just don't know if don't even know if that's possible with all the different bodies in the room.
Right.
So I don't know. Yeah, I personally don't concern myself with that. I only concern myself with if half the room or more than half the room is just not doing anything that I asked for on either side of that equation.
Yeah, and the reason I brought that up is it's so interesting to think of, like, how do we measure being effective? And for me, it's just like, hey, they are grappling, and it makes sense what they're doing. Whether or not they're doing what I would do, what they did makes sense. It was efficient. They can probably do it consistently at some point. That's all I'm really looking for. And I think that can be a thing where it's like, it looks like everyone's just fucking around, but like it's ugly, right? Training now is way uglier, I would say, and that can sometimes be a hang up. And for you, it's got to be because like lots of people I talk to aren't running rooms of like 60 people at a time, which is why I was really excited to chat with you a little bit, because I know you guys have an active floor all the time and sort of all your programs, and like, that's a different thing, because then it's like, you would love to have eyes on every pair's progress consistently throughout the session, but you just can't, so you gotta, I'm sure maybe you can, but
No,
we
I have a
just
couple other
can't.
folks sometimes. I have a couple other folks in the room from time, on Mondays. So I have one of my black belts, Steve Fogel, been with us for years. Came all the way through the ranks to black belt. I forget when he got his black belt, but he is pretty much my afternoon coach. So he teaches a Tuesday afternoon class, a Thursday afternoon class, and then classes, and we call blitzes, kind of like open mats, but structured open mats. So we call them blitz. Probably a dumb name, but people don't like it. And so he comes in Monday nights, and he takes the class at least the first 45 or 50 minutes before he goes home, and he comes back and blah, blah, blah. But he's walking around the room, and every now and again he'll come up to me and say, I'm seeing people missing this, or this is what's happening. If I have another eye or two in the room. So it's definitely not always just the one person. And that was an unusually large class, because it was people just came back from spring break, and we just had the belt ceremony. Everyone's excited. But that class can still have about 40 people in it regularly. So I definitely have some other eyes, but no, you're not going to get to everyone. But if you if people are coming to that class on Monday, and then people are grappling in a class on Wednesday, and coming to no-gi on Thursday, and coming to open mats on Saturday, and you get a chance and now have, 21 black belts, and throughout the week, I would say at least 10 of them are on the mats. The ones who aren't on the mats are just the ones that don't live in Athens anymore. But for the most part, there are a lot of black belts on the mat. There are brown belts and there are purple belts. And when we're thinking about who's next for a promotion, about a month out, a text stream goes out to all the browns and black belts, and it's like, throw your names out. And there might be, there might be somebody talked about for blue, and if everyone else is like, I'm not sure, or if like, yeah, possibly, let me get a role in the next week or two, because at the end of the day, it is performance. We do our white belts and we have some little sheets we fill out just to kind of make sure we're keeping eyes on people, and we can see now they're in that first blue or that second blue, which is the third stripe or fourth stripe, and we're making sure we're keeping up with people and seeing people. But then it just comes down to, let me grab a role with that person. And then if enough people roll with that person are like, oh yeah, wholeheartedly agree, or if enough people roll like, I'm not quite sure, blue belts really only need about 1 or 2 black belts to say, I think they're ready. Purple, maybe a few more folks, brown for sure, obviously black is the final decision made. But even if you don't always have eyes on everyone, at least people are grappling with them. And then you can say, is this person a blue belt compared to their peers? They don't have, they're not going to be a 20-year-old blue belt if they're 45 years old. Or, if they're a mom who's been in the program for a couple of years, who joined up after their kids joined up, I don't expect that 40-year-old mom to be able to grapple like the 20-year-old blue belt that's getting his blue belt the same day. So since there is always a component of performance, even if you can't have eyes on everyone every class, you will get eyes on everyone throughout a period of 2 years or so. And those folks it's almost that it will always work out, almost always work out. That's probably not English, but it will work out mostly that the people who you are considering for promotion are getting time in with all of the upper belts. No blue belt in my gym has ever gotten a blue belt, and I never touched them. No, I think that's right. Like the 2 ladies, I've grappled with them, and the other gentlemen who have been on, everyone's, the browns and the purples, browns, and the blacks are usually putting hands on those people because they also know that they need to be grappling with the higher belts, and you can't ask a higher belt to grapple. And I know in some places you can't ask the black belt to grapple. So I'm sitting on a mat, puffing and puffing, and here comes one of my white belts, who've been training for a year or two, and it's like, yeah, come on, let's go. And if he's going hard in the paint, then he gets put on his back and smashed. And if he's not, then we have a fun roll. And I'm okay with either, because there's still that part of me that likes to compete, even though I'm broken and old. But no one's going to work through the gym over the course of 2 years and be up for a promotion that I've not grappled with, or that some of my other black belts haven't grappled with. Maybe not in a week or two or a month or two. And then that's why we have those conversations. And it's like, okay, well, let me get a roll with them and see where I think they're at. And even in a big room, over time, everyone will get touched by a person who gets to make that decision at the end, because blues and purples, really, those are more communal. Browns and blacks have to be a little bit more dialed in to the black belts and stuff, but it seems to work out. I've never walked away from a belt ceremony. We just had 11 people get new belts on Sunday. I've never walked away from a belt ceremony going, ooh, I think we fucked that one up. Like, you watch these folks go through 80 plus people in a span of 90 minutes to 100 minutes, and you're like, doing some really good jiu-jitsu. Yeah, older folks and younger folks doing the jiu-jitsu you would expect them to do against their peers, holding the line, so to say. So I think it all works out in the end in that regard.
Rory, I'm curious, because I know for me, like, on my team, like, the association I'm part of and things, like, blue belt used to have, like, certain things we would look for. Like they got to be able to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Like, and now for me, it's like they don't really have to be able to do anything. They just have to be to do things in these certain scenarios, in a guard scenario, in a chest bat. Like, and it's changed for me. Like the needle's moving because it's like doesn't matter that they're not good at collar chokes because it used to matter a lot to me that like they were able to do this, that, and that because of like our lineage. Hey, it's all about cross collar chokes and whatever. Like, but they're pretty effective overall. Is that thing really crucial anymore, or because obviously it matters, but doesn't too? Like I sometimes am like in this weird space about like how do I evaluate now because I came from hey I can check mark this list, and of course there's a list, but then there's the grappling side too, the performance. But now it's like it's mostly all performance and awareness. That's really what I'm looking at now is like, are they aware in all these situations and can they perform in at least these situations where they have maybe, something that like for me, just like describe what we do. One is to blue belt. Hey, you need to know the basic like signposts in every positions, meaning like hey the main sort of outcomes that you would want to try to work for from here or there, and you have like a style that you would like to try and play for guard in a way that you like to try and pass the guard consistently. Does it mean you hit it on everyone? Not yet. You're just a blue belt, but you're starting to create your first like funnel sort of idea. That's what I look at now. Whereas before it was very much, can you do these things? How has your sort of like idea of, hey, what's this look like changed, if at all? Maybe it hasn't.
I think, to be honest, it's always sort of been the same. It's been performance against peers. So if I've got a 20-something-year-old blue belt, then how does he perform against how does he perform against other 20-year-old blue belts? And then, is he or she able to maybe give some of the newer purples some game? Doesn't have to be better than, because then he'd obviously be a purple belt. But can they give that purple belt some game? Are they grappling fundamentally? So again, I'm a 200-pound 4-3 black belt. It's hard if I it's hard if I have to base their blue belt abilities sort of on how they grapple against me. But at the same time, are they doing things fundamentally? So if I'm passing their guard, are they trying to find, posture of some kind? Now, I know what posture means because I've been doing this forever and I've called this thing posture, but are they trying to prevent me from landing on their chest, and are they moving their hips away? Are they trying to recover their guard or find underhooks? When they're in my guard, are they trying, reverse engineer that? Are they trying to prevent me from having grips or controlling their posture? Are they trying to get chest to chest on me, find underhooks and cross faces? Are they doing the jiu-jitsu that I, for the last year, have had them focus on? And even prior to that, those were always things we were doing, chest to chest connections and preventing connections and make and maintain. We might not have used that language the same way over the years, but it was always things we were doing. But do I need a blue belt to have like a really solid submission game? No, but I'd love to have a blue belt that at least is threatening things. Unless they're a beast, most blue belts aren't submitting me. But I know if a blue belt is trying something like trying to climb and find an armbar, or trying to feed and find a triangle, or trying to get my hands on a mat to bend my arms for other submissions, or putting feet on my hips and trying to find those connections, trying off balance and sweep me. But unless, so when I grapple with a lower belt, a white belt, a blue belt, if they are doing things right, then I let them into the game to see where that goes. If they're doing things wrong, then they just suffer. And then either within the grapple or after the grapple, I might be like, if you just keep pushing on my chest, we're just going to lay here for a while, because this is not how you escape this position. And then if they don't change up, then that's where they get stuck. But if a blue belt or white belt, but starts to put hands in proper places and tries to get on their side and tries to bring their knees to their chest or bridge and roll, things like that. Like, I know what that's supposed to look like. And I know the difference between trying to muscle me into things as opposed to trying to do things the right way. I let them grapple. And then I can say, well, this person's trying to find the right answers. They're not just trying to be big and strong and explosive and young and blah, blah, blah. Then I'm good. And then when I see them grapple with other blue belts, how are they performing? Are they finding those things? Or if they're grappling with other white belts, are they finding some of those things? And then again, they don't have to be awesome at submissions. They don't have to be awesome at sweeps, but they need to be able to show me just a tacit understanding of those things. And then how do they do against the other folks in the room that are already at that level? And yeah, we can take that all the way back. How did you figure out the blue belt before them and the blue belt before them? It's like you just get a feeling for it, I think, after a while. And then if you have enough folks in the room who understand it, and if we've done a good job as the black belts and the head coaches to sort of disseminate what we expect of people to earn those next belts, then the group effort usually maintains a pretty solid upgrade culture. But it's not easy. For sure, it's not easy.
Great, thanks for sort of sharing your view on that, because I just love all the perspectives and just the thought process. Um, Earlier you sort of mentioned something that I wanted to come back to, which was sort of your like OG students and them adopting or adjusting rather. You sort of mentioned that some of them had some challenges in the sense that they were getting used to not being fed the info, but that changed on them a little. What was that like? What did you see, and what sort of helped them through it?
To be honest, it hasn't been it hasn't been difficult. And I just think part of that's because, we are fortunate to have, in my opinion, and it can only be my opinion, but actions speak for themselves. We have one of the best coaches in all of martial arts in the room. You spoke to my brother, and I dote on him, not just because he's my older brother, but there's certainly a part of that, but also because I have spent, I'll be 48 in May. I've spent nearly all but 3 years of my life with him. And we've done martial arts together since I'm 11. And he started martial arts when he was much younger, but we've been doing martial arts since I'm 11. So that's 37 years almost that we've been doing martial arts together. And we've done a lot of BS and then, not BS. I think the fact that he is so well respected in the room and in general allowed us to make this switch somewhat seamlessly with our students who had been doing this for a while. I think it's been hard on our coaches to some degree. Again, not because they coached here are the 3 techniques, go live. We never did it like that, but still, there's certainly, you have to have a little bit more of an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. But for the couple of students that had a harder time, you just have conversations with them. You try and get them to see what it is you are seeing and why you've made this change. At the end of the day, you present it so that they understand that I am teaching you all the things that you think you want me to spoon feed to you, but just in a slightly different way. And then just you do your best to explain it, and then you just say, give me some leeway on this. I've only been doing this for a little bit of time. Let's see where this leads you in the next 3 months. If you're still having concerns, we'll come back again. And then, or give me this many months. If you're still having concerns, we'll come back. And then when they ask questions in class, you say that the way you want me to answer it. So let's just look at this in a different way and hope that you are satisfying them. Some people are just, I don't think they have an issue with it, but some people are just a little bit more averse to change than others. And there is a change, but you can make them see like, hey, like this, is it really that different than how we've been doing things? Yes, I haven't put you through all the motions of a triangle, but I started you at the end, then I backed you out a step. You know what you know what it's supposed to look like. You're not going to do it to me the same way you're going to do it to someone else. So let's play this. Here's this drill, or here's this game where now you have one arm out, one arm in, and your feet are crossed, and I need you to get to this end position. We've already been in the end position, so you know what it looks like. Just put your foot underneath your knee and then figure out how to adjust yourself to constricting the neck. And if you get a tap, you win. Awesome. If it struggled to get a tap, then you know that you were effective because you got the tap, but it probably wasn't the most efficient. So how can you adjust? Have you considered some of these things? Didn't say did you do this, but have you considered some of these things? You don't want to be on their trap because the only thing you want to submit is their neck. So have you considered some ways to get your legs in such a way that you're only on their neck? Maybe you put a foot on the hip. Maybe you grab this. Maybe you adjust a little bit. Maybe you shoulder walk. Go play some more. You know what the end position is. And then over time, I think people immerse themselves in it enough, they start to recognize that I taught them an armbar because we started at the end of an armbar. And then I taught them other ways to bend arms because we started in the end of those positions. And then I just said, try and put their hands on the mat. And when you put their hand on the mat, punish that hand. Now try and lock your arm over it and grab your own wrist. And I think over time, when they start to have success, it's all good. And it's during the times when maybe they're having less success that they get a little uneasy about it. But that uneasiness doesn't last very long because if you're doing all the things right, again, your best to do all things right, then eventually there is success. And if you point out success, not always the end result, but the attempts at getting to end results, which is why, again, it becomes a more difficult thing as a coach, because I don't want to interrupt things when they're going well, but at the same time, I want to make people recognize, oh man, did you see how you just got there? File that away somewhere. That was good. I don't know what you fucking did, but you got there. Do that again. Right? So it takes more out of me as the coach, again, doing my best throughout the weeks and the months and the years to keep my eyes on things, to point out success, and then also try and within a group say, hey, have you considered this? You're real close there. Have you considered this? And I think over time, people that are having a hard time with that don't really have the same hard time with it as they did in the very beginning. And again, it's been pretty few and far between. Again, and I think that's because people respect their head coach enough in the room, the guy running, the adult program, who was Adam. And then you point out to them things from time to time that hopefully reinforce that what we are doing is benefiting them. And then you get less pushback. Now, if you get someone who comes into the room who came from one of those, here are the 3 moves and grapple live, those people are sometimes lost. But when I asked them, how'd you enjoy that class? They're always like, man, that's a great class. Because they worked from minute 1 to minute 60 or however long they worked. They might not understand all the ideas behind ecological dynamics, but they know they got a great workout. They know they had some success and some failures. And really, that's at the end of the day, just really, I think all anybody really needs in a 60-minute class is to have some success and have some failure.
I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I found very similar. They were like, oh, class was amazing. And I think one thing that, the more live your session is, the more likely you are to hit on everyone's reason for being there in the first place. Whether it was fitness, self-defense, they wanted to learn skills, they wanted to be social. The more time you're live, the more likely I feel like you're checking all those boxes. So I agree there. One thing that, we talked a little bit about setting up. Well, we didn't really talk about what we talked about making practice, but what is your role when they're live? So they're playing your games. What type of feedback stuff do you like to do? Because some people like to be not hands off, but very much their role is more so to, restate the goals and the, intentions of the game and whatever else. Whereas me, I'm one, of course, I'm good finding, I'm calling great outcomes when they happen, but I'm questioning people. I'm giving, sort of trying to direct them. What do you see is like your role? And of course, you know, you're coaching other coaches on how to be effective when people are playing too. So like, what do you like to emphasize when it comes to feedback while they're playing or even after? Like, how do you balance that, or what do you work on there?
I will certainly try to spend some time with some groups. Again, I won't get to all of them because there were a lot. Like last night, there were a lot of them. So I will just scan the room, walk around the room. Again, Coach Steve was with me last night, so he was walking around the room. I try to interrupt as little as possible. If I see an opportunity in a group because there's, you know, they're just not maybe getting it. Depending on the side, I might propose something. If I see someone do something and I'll be like, that was great, just kind of like you said, Kabir, just try and point out so that people recognize that those are like you earned that now. Like that's yours. You did that, that's yours. I didn't feed it to you. Put that somewhere. Somebody's having trouble. If I see the group in general is having trouble, sometimes I'll stop the clock, I'll stop the music, and I'll just be like, hey, this is something that I'm not seeing, or this is something I would like to see, or I might have to add a piece and say, hey, by the way, bottom person, I didn't mention it, but I'd also like you to be thinking about, becoming the top person. If maybe that wasn't stated, that's also a thing you can do so that I'm not decomposing, the person on either side too much so that it is as representative as possible within uh, that the goal I set. Because not all like I said, one goal last night was just clear a grip and sit up, pal posture as opposed to hiding. We do that with kids. And one it might be, we started with a cross collar and a sleeve, and I gave the person on bottom these goals, and again, the top person set yourself up. You might have to deal with the sleeve first. You might have to deal with the collar first. Double up your chin. Like that's invariant to me. Like try and make a double chin so when they got that collar grip, they can't break you down. And then you might have to clear the sleeve first, or you might be able to come to the collar first. But if you can't come to the collar, then you got to clear the sleeve. And here's the why, or here's how you might be able to do that. You have to see that because not everybody knows how to clear a grip, and those are invariants. There's only so many ways you can clear a grip that's not going to get you in trouble. And then clear this sleeve and then clear this collar. It's a reset as opposed to a switch. And your goal, your reward for clearing those out is give them back. And we're going to play here for a few minutes, and then we're going to switch you top and bottom. And if I see people struggling, sometimes they raise a hand and ask a question. I come by and try and give some things to consider. If I see the room struggling, you have to stop the music and give the whole room something to consider. And then if I see something go well, and I do my best to do that throughout the evening to as many groups as I can between me and my other coach on the mat. You're not going to get to everybody. And I'm not teaching to the 10% or the 10% that are really good. You're teaching that 80, so you do your best to touch that 80% as much as possible. But again, if they keep coming throughout the week and throughout the months and years, then over time, they're going to see these same games over and over. And sometimes they're going to see the exact same game. In another couple of weeks or months or whatever it is, when I come back to guard top, I'm going to have the bottom person grab a collar grip. I might change it up a little bit and say, okay, you're trying to find a second hand, but you can also become the top person. So you don't get the person who leans all the way back. They have to adjust for that. But they're going to see it all. So I found that I actually probably stress a little bit less about the end for them, and the end being them learning jiu-jitsu the way I want them to learn jiu-jitsu, than I did before when I see a bunch of people that I've told how to do something with all these steps, and then it looks like everyone in the room is like a monkey fucking a football, and I'm like, this is on me. If I'm the coach, this is on me. I have failed. And it's not that you teach people who are at such varying levels of ability in a room. I have been in rooms before with a black belt coach teaching so much shit that I was like, what am I doing? And I'm asking the purple belt I'm working with, what do I do here? That's ridiculous. That I, as a black belt, I'm asking a purple belt what we're doing here because I forgot all the things because we did so many things and then go live. Like, to me, that's a failure. And if I'm the coach in the room teaching that, then and you see that I can't, like, then that's on you, man. But now there's less of that, and then I worry less because I know that over time they're going to keep seeing not the technique I'm teaching them, but how I want them to grapple. And that takes actually a little bit of stress off my shoulders. You find that? Do you find that to be similar?
Yeah, I mean, that's really where I'm at. Is I just want to know as much as just the end. And I really, one thing is, I've always had a really lot of faith in like the process. So I always try and encourage, marathon mentality. I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier. And I think coaching this way sort of forces you to adopt that too, because it's going to be ugly, it's going to be messy, and it's going to be accumulation of experience that'll help them, calibrate a little bit. Um, what more and more now I think about, I always used to think about it when I was planning, but like planning your practice like in over time, right? Because you mentioned a couple times, they'll circle back, they'll come back and we'll revisit this topic. How do you plan in sort of that more zoomed out, not a single practice, not a single week level, but are you thinking, because some people like that I've spoken with, they're just responsive to the room. They'll have a block on this, and then when they feel like they're okay, they'll move on. Other people, like myself, for example, I try and be fairly structured and hey, we're going to do a 2 week block with a couple core focuses, then a next 2 week block, and I know maybe in the course of 20 weeks, 16 weeks, we'll be all the way back, square one, let's say. How do you like to sort of plan at sort of a larger level?
So first I'll say I don't, that's not me. So the
Mm-hmm.
plan that Adam has for us, because again, he takes care of the adult stuff. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so we go pin, escape, guard, for lack of a better word, pass, and then there's usually some wrestling style. Sometimes stand up, but also sometimes on the ground, like more holding things on the ground in certain ways that might be considered more of a wrestling sort of state than anything else. But a lot of times it's just sort of on the feet. So it's basically 5 weeks, and we try. I know Greg was big on it, so Adam adopted it and really liked it. Try and play the whole game. So I'll use last night. Last night we had a collar grip, we had a collar and a sleeve. Then we stood up, and you got 3 to 4 connections. Again, focusing on sort of giving them a hierarchy in a sense, not telling them how to do it, but like, hey, you're all bent over right now with your ass out. Anything you do with sleeves and collars just going to get you lifted in the air because I'm connected to your hips. And then my partner, who was actually working with Coach Steve, so he just lifts me up. I'm like, I'm here playing with all these other things, and I'm just in the air like this. So you probably want to think about getting rid of these hip connections first, and then while you're getting rid of hip connections, maybe other connections break because your partner doesn't have a great grip. But that's how you have to think about that. And then you're disentangling, and then I want you to get chest to chest. I don't care if you pass. I don't care if you're in a half guard. But your end game and your win is to remove all these grips, get chest to chest, think about the hips first, then maybe the collar and sleeve, depending upon where you feel most in danger. So you might clear this. Here's how you might clear that, and just play a little bit. Let them see some examples. And bottom person, you're continuously trying to reacquire your grips, you're trying to become a top person, blah, 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 right? And then they play.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my 3 drills that really were based on the grip stuff, because I want to introduce a little bit more of that into the room. A, because we have competitors, and B, you're wearing this thing every now and again. Just play with it. Like, most of my
Mm-hmm.
jiu-jitsu is certainly not dependent upon that, but at the same time, it's fun to play with it because we're going to do this until we can't do this anymore. And sometimes you just need to make it a little bit different to keep it fun and refreshed, and other people are going to do it also. So just play with it a little bit. But those are the 3 games. And then since we did passing, or since we
Mm-hmm.
did the bottom, I just put them in I think I put them in a half guard. And we did some passing. Bottom person, clear your knee, gets cross side or mount. Top person, clear your knee, gets cross side or mount. Find yourself chest to chest. bottom person, you're trying to recover your guard, you're trying to stand, you're trying to take the back. And that one was a little bit more, wasn't necessarily as focused, but we had just been playing some of those positions. And then we just started from standing. I ran out on time a little bit because I had a little bit of words in the beginning, so I had a little less time. And we just finished one person standing, one person seated, grapple through to submission, switch on the win. So we played the entire game right there at the end. And if the bottom person stands up, then top person sits down. We weren't going to wrestle from the feet since we did. So I'm trying to touch the thing we did the week before, and since we're pretty much doing the opposites, then I just got to give a little bit of extra focus to the person on the bottom since we worked bottom last week, and then play the whole game. And that's pretty much it. It's just those 4 weeks and a stand up, and that's a 5-week rotation. And if Coach Adam's keeping his lessons and I'm keeping my lessons, then when I come back around to this block of material, then I can change the focus a little bit or change the winning conditions a little bit. Because I know that if we change the focus a little bit or change the winning conditions a little bit or change the partners from time to time, like all those things are going to allow for them to recognize, right? Different attentions and blah, 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 whatever all those things are. But people are going to see different things because they're going to be different. The environment's going to be different. The training partner is going to be different. The time might be a little different. But as far as planning it out, if we're in, as far as I understand it, having read a little bit, listened to a bunch of podcasts, read some papers that Adam sends me, if we're doing something that is so based upon the environment and the constraints that we give people and how they perceive all the things we're doing and such, then can you script out everything if then everything is so very focused on really that moment in time? How do I know I'm ever even going to get to that thing that I might have scripted out over the course? So we just play with the different positions and try and play the whole game. And then there's it's probably less stressful because then you start thinking about other things and how can I fit this thing in or how do I pull this thing out? Then just each class is a little bit different from 5 weeks to 5 weeks. Try and find maybe a little different thing to focus on, and they're going to get all of it eventually. And then every now and again, I'm like, hey, I'd really like to add. I know we're doing bottom guard. I'd really like to add a bunch of grabbing. And again, here's the reasons why, and I'll do my best to make it as ecological as possible. And I think I did a pretty good job. I have been on Monday nights running my kids in a way through the same lesson plans. They're my submission samurai. So every Monday I work with my comp team. Those are the kids who go to compete. And I have been running them through the same lessons that I've been running my adults through right after I teach them. And having a tremendous amount of success with the kids. Like, I got some young kids in that room, and they're doing things. Like, I had a kid basically helicopter sweep his partner. Had he known how to armbar her from there, he would have helicopter swept her and armbarred her all at the same time. It would have been like Demetrius Johnson level. It would have been awesome. But this is a kid I've only had in that class with me for a few months now. And he's doing really, really good jiu-jitsu. The girl he was working with, she's doing really good jiu-jitsu. She's winning tournaments. She's 6 years old. She's in my chimpanzee class with 7-year-olds, and she's doing really good jiu-jitsu. So I'm running my lessons with them and then taking some notes about what they or may not be getting. And then I'm just fixing my adult lesson. But for the last 2 weeks, I ran the kids and the adults through the same level. I can't script. What am I going to script out over the course of 20 weeks? And I think that's where a lot of the stress can be brought in. Like, how do I plan all of this? Like, I don't know if you're supposed to plan it. We're living in the moment in a sense. You write a lesson plan, and then you're supposed to have, you might not even get through the lesson plan because you might have game 1, drill 1, and then that's like, I fucked that up. That didn't work. So I got to, in the moment, try and fix that and then try that again, but try and refocus their attention on some things, right? So I don't think we do. I don't think Adam does. And since he's the one leading the charge, I just kind of follow his lead. And this is kind of how he has set it out for us.
Obviously how you design practice, how you think about the week to week, things like that, which I think for me, like I run an all levels room all the time, partly because I just sort of think it's all the same. It's just the better people always are on task. and so it might as well just keep exposing everyone to those key primary tasks, but I do also see a lot of value in splitting. And of course, for you, you run a larger school than me, I think, in terms of like grappling, like adult component or whatever. So like, do you tier it or do you have all levels? How do you guys like to approach that?
I have a foundations program, which will drain to sort of the more, I would say, beginner pieces, trying to get that to be more alive. Both my stand-up portion or our MMA portion, because we do a foundations BJJ, and we used to do a foundations stand-up, but now it's pretty much just foundations MMA. Trying to, again, play the whole game, get into a little bit more stand-up to clinch to ground, things like that. And then, so jiu-jitsu wise,
Oh,
a foundations lesson what happened? Uh-oh, we there?
no.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
So foundations jiu-jitsu might just be based on very early and less variability. And then so people sort of understand so I don't have to play those first level games with people in the next level, which is an all level. Somebody might be in my foundations program for 4 weeks and then move into the all levels class. Our foundations programs really develop more to try and teach them a little bit of the culture, and then I have them stay there also. Like, so they don't, there's no graduation. In ours, it's just a chance to get a little bit more intensity, start to train with their coaches, start to be a part of the larger group of classes, uh, do a little bit more wrestling, maybe some more takedowns. We keep takedowns. There are no takedowns in foundations. There's no from standing to the ground, but they'll learn how to control things and maybe pick up a leg. But we kind of keep the variability less in foundations and let them sort of focus on that. And then moving into sort of the all levels class, it's a remnant of our old gym, the hardcore gym. It's called the Hardcore Athlete Program. And then those people that were just in foundations maybe 4 or 6 weeks ago are going to come to those classes. But my goal is for them to also still stay in foundations and still spend time with some less variability, so they're having a little bit more success and they're learning some more of those fundamental pieces before they add in more variability coming into a class like mine last night. But since we have that class, and I expect them to stay in it for a period of time and still be learning in that, it's still alive, but less intense maybe, don't necessarily have to worry about all the white belts in the room performing to the level that maybe you want everyone in the room to perform to. Like, you want everyone to perform great, but you won't, because again, people are on different journeys. But since they can go back and take it down a notch in a sense, then I can also still have them in my room, hopefully properly partner paired, working with someone so they're having success. Even though they might be white belts, they're still having success because they're working with other white belts, or a blue belt's working with a blue belt or a purple belt. I don't have a room where the black belts are just being black belts with blue belts, and then the blue belt's not really gaining anything because the black belt is just shutting all that down. So they get a chance to work sort of with their peers in a smaller setting, because my foundations classes are certainly they're not 50 people in my foundations class because we have 3 of them throughout the day, but they're getting that opportunity to sort of work that less intense in a sense, because they're still doing a live training, but it is less intense because they're a little bit more focused on the beginner pieces, in a sense, the more foundational, fundamental pieces. And then, they're doing some other things on either side, trying to build a culture, try and build a tribe, try and help them to better understand what they're doing and why they're there and why they made a good decision to join, SBG Athens. So, but in my other, like last night, I had a range of folks from, a few months into, me on the mat. Some of my black belts, I had quite a few black belts on the mat last night. So, doing away with foundations, I want to say we still have it. Part of that's business-wise, tribe building, but the other classes are all, I have hardcore athlete. We have a warrior athlete program also. Those people spar and stuff. Not everybody in the gym wants to spar, stand up, and do MMA, but all those folks are in the room together, and then hopefully, again, pairing themselves up properly. And then after a class on Monday, if there's an hour of jiu-jitsu, then some folks will stick around for 30 minutes, hopefully do some live rolling, more just open mat style, and then some others might stay around for the full hour to do some more of that open mat. But what I've noticed more than anything is many folks go home after the class is over at 7. Now, as much as we'd like them to stay and work on the things, spend an hour doing jiu-jitsu, sometimes that's all people have, both time-wise, because they have lives, and you're happy for them to be there for the hour to learn, and they're doing it alive from 0 to 60. It's all alive. Sometimes those folks are done. Like, they just got an hour's worth of drilling, basically. Now, we think of drilling as an alive drill, but they've got an hour worth of playing games. Sometimes that's all people have in them is that hour. They're done. I'm going to go home and eat dinner. Class is 6 to 7. So they're done.
Right. Yeah. No, that's very true. And that's sort of one thing I've really liked about going more and more live is like uh recognizing the value of people's time. I'm like, man, if you can only make it 2 hours here in a week, 2 separate occasions, and you only go live for 30 minutes through the full week, that's not very good, Whereas now people are probably going live for, 90 minutes of those 2 hours, which
Sure.
is way more what I want. They get more value and just like things like that. Um, cool. I really like that. Your foundations is really something that you emphasize, sort of like the culture building that tribe, building sort of the mindsets and things that they will need to do it for the long run and to sort of like actually be prepared in not only the physical but just like understanding training, why they're there, what that process is going to feel like, look like. I assume you're sort of like really intentional on that culture, because for me I find culture is the most important thing to having a good training room. You can have the best coaching methods, the best whatever, but if people are just in the wrong headspace, let's say, about it all, it really is at the end of the day ineffective. So it's great to hear that you're huge on, and I know you guys are, and I just wanted to sort of highlight that because you guys have always done a really great job of like one tribe, one vibe. I'm like, oh, dude, I'm into it. I'm into it. And I'm over here.
Yeah, I mean,
But it,
that's it. You want people to stick around. And, I think about before we really understood how to do this as a business, which certainly changed the scope of how we do things. But again, always, I think the product was always great, but the business wasn't always awesome. But then once you figure out how to do the business aspect of it and bring people into something and slowly integrate them into sort of more intense training or more, varied training, whatever it may be, you realize that when you didn't do that, how many people you failed. And if you aren't doing that, you are failing people because what you want is for people to do this for their entire lives. And whether they do it in Athens, which is not the greatest place to have a gym, we have way more families than we ever did. I have more kids on the mat, but we only started that in 2009 with our kids program. But now I have, maybe 100 plus kids in our kids program. We're still very heavily weighted in the adults. And I think that's just more a matter of scheduling than anything else. But you realize that your goal or your job one is to have people do this thing and do it with you because you believe you do it better than anybody else. And if you don't build a culture and build a tribe and teach people how to be good training partners, because not everybody understands that, you've got a room of 20-year-old kids coming over from college, UGA, into a room with 50-year-old men and women and moms and dads and professionals. You got to go to work the next day and don't want to be all fucked up. That if you don't spend time doing that, then what you end up is just a room full of just athletes always being athletes, as opposed to regular people training like athletes. We're all athletes in the room, but there's only a handful of, there's just a much smaller percentage of the population who can train at that level of intensity all the time and then, come back and do it every day or do it multiple hours a day. And then all of those people were on my mat last night. All of my amateur fighters were on the mat last night, and I'll roll with them. I'm 48 years old, and I'll roll with my 20-year-olds. But they have to know that if you roll with me like you would roll with another 20-year-old in the room, then I'm just going to lay here and just defend myself, protect myself, or I'm going to be forced to try and fuck you up. And then I'm not going to have a wonderful night myself. And don't tell me, well, you're a 4-3 black belt. You should be able to, like, dude, I'm a 48-year-old 4-3 black belt who broke 2 of his ribs a year ago and has had surgeries and got a bad neck. Like, I'm still on the mat doing my best every night to protect myself and make sure that everyone I roll with is protected. And that has its own difficulties in and of itself. So you have to have a program or a culture that puts that above everything. Everyone can say no to anybody who wants to roll with them, but I want to have a room where everyone is comfortable saying yes. And then if you want to say no, say no. But I want to have a room where everyone's comfortable saying yes. And I will still grapple with some people that I don't necessarily feel super excited to grapple with just because they're big and they're strong. And I'm like, I know this is going to be a pain in my ass, but I'll do it because I can feel comfortable knowing that everybody who I roll with understands we're going to roll honest. You're not going to explode into or out of anything. If you put it in gear 3, you were going to stay in gear 3 no matter what happens. But if you put it in gear 1 and we're rolling at gear 1 and all of a sudden I put you in an armbar and you explode out of that, or you find me in something, you explode into it, then you get to do that like once. And if you don't fix that shit, you're not going to be around because you're going to hurt me or start hurting other people. And I'm pretty proud of the fact that for the most part, we're fairly injury free. And it's usually more freakish accidents than being in a room that I've been in before when I'm training with people that are supposed to be my training partners. And the most important thing for that person in that moment was to submit me. So much so that he hurts me. I don't even get a chance to tap, but he just hurts me. And I'm like, we're fucking done, dude. Like, we're not going to do this. You could submit me without hurting me in a training room. But if we're training and you take this to fight level, then we're going to stand up, we're going to put on gloves, and we're going to fight. We're not going to do this where I think we're all on the same page here. And you have to develop that. And if you don't develop that, then you are going to have a giant attrition rate, a revolving door, and you're going to find that your room gets younger and younger and younger and hardly has any women in it. And the women that you do have, and mentality-wise, they're no different than the men. Like, and you don't get a lot of women like that. Like, no gym's got that amount of women who have the mentality of the men. I have moms and dads and professionals and white and blue collar, and they're all on the mat working together. And 2 of my 40-year-old women just got blue belts the other day. That's the room I want. I've got a mid 40-year-old who got a blue belt a little while ago. She'll be a purple belt soon. It took her forever to get comfortable being on the mat. She's 6'3". She will get after it, but yet it took her forever to figure out that she could do this. But it's because she was in a room with people that could move her through the process as opposed to just getting smashed because everyone's got an ego and no one wants to train with women and let them and be good training partners. If you're not developing that, then you are failing so many people. And there's so much of that. I know we got off the topic of coaching. Well, there's so much of that. And it makes me angry because there's so many shitty coaches in the world, but there are so many shitty environments that we are here to try and help people better their lives. And every time someone says to me, "You have changed my life," I think about, the old days of the hardcore gym when I was fighting and Brian was fighting and Steven Ledbetter and Jeff Bedard and putting people in the UFC and the WC and making world champions. How many people that we failed because they walked into into a pressure cooker because we weren't getting students to beat up, but that was just the room. It's like that Patrice O'Neill bit. That's just what we did. That is just how we trained. And it wasn't to be mean but that's how we trained. And not everybody could handle that. And the ones that could handle that, a lot of those folks are still with me. But I think about all the folks that from those days who aren't, and I failed them. The culture failed them. And I want to do way more of helping people achieve all the things everyone wants to achieve. Like you said earlier, there's so many reasons why people are in a room. But they've all got to be in a room to achieve the things that they want to achieve, and can't achieve it without building that tribe and that culture above everything else. And then you can have a room where you have your fighters training with the regular people, and and then fighters training somewhat separately from the regular people. But most of my classes have all the people training together, and then there are a handful of classes, and there are some moments in those classes where the people who want to work a little harder get to work a little harder and prepare for fighting, or train with each other in other classes because they're going to be preparing more for fighting. But every now and again, I'll see those folks with all the regular folks, and then you've created something that can withstand the test of time, pandemics, being in Athens, Georgia, with an influx of new college students coming and going because they're graduating all the time. It's a lot of successful business. And I think this is just making that all more successful, because I believe, like you said earlier, it's not 30 minutes of watching me be, hey, look at me, I can coach, look at all the shit I know, and go do it like I told you to do it. And if you can't do it like I told you to do it, at least I always took that upon myself, but I don't have to take that upon myself anymore because I'm just not teaching it that way anymore. And I'm seeing people do better jiu-jitsu, do better martial arts, mixed martial arts, all the things. And I see it in myself more than anything else. I said the other day to my students at the end of class, I said, is anybody else noticing in moments where they can stop, where they're not grappling as hard maybe, anybody else noticing that you're doing the things that you are being asked to focus on in all these rounds? I have noticed my jiu-jitsu get better. Again, I'm 48, I've been doing this for a while, but I feel like my jiu-jitsu has gotten better. I have not gotten better. I'm destroying myself. But I notice my jiu-jitsu getting better because I notice that I'm doing all the things that I've been asking everyone else to focus on, or I've been focusing on in the classes that I'm not coaching. And it has made me a better grappler. That's how I know this is right, because it's working for me. And if it's working for me after all these years, then I know it's going to work for everybody else in the room when they come into it day one. And every day someone new comes in a room, they're coming into the best jiu-jitsu we're coaching every day. And I believe that the jiu-jitsu we're coaching today is far better than the jiu-jitsu we've ever coached. And I can see that when I look out, and I can see that when I look more inside to my own jiu-jitsu.
Man, you touched on a bunch of amazing things, right? And like, you sort of felt like we were getting away from the coaching conversation. I really disagree. The culture thing is a key part of the coaching conversation, right? Like, it can't be overstated how important it really is, to make sure that is like the number one thing, because your goal is not to be someone's last coach in martial arts, or like the reason they don't want to do martial arts, because it's a very different experience. Like, if you get a bad haircut somewhere, you don't stop getting haircuts, you just go somewhere else. But if you have a bad martial arts experiment, you just say fuck martial arts, right? And I'm sure you have things that, like, man, your life has improved in so many ways because of, what you've gotten through, like the lifestyle of training and, experience of the people you've met. So yeah, I think it's really important that people understand that, because sometimes I'll still hear people who are like, oh, those who it's for will stay. It's like, that's a really lazy approach. That's just laziness. If you want to run that mindset, that's super lazy, because you also touched on it too. We have very similar philosophies where it's like, it's not about my top 10% of achievers. It's not that bottom 10. I'm all about the middle 80, because the middle 80 is what will move the mountain, long term. That is where we'll make the most impact. Even though when you look at the room, they're totally serviceable. They don't catch your eye. They don't, like, they're just doing the thing. And that's the beauty. That's sort of what you've always aspired, is people just do the thing, enjoy doing the thing, be in there, I just wanted to echo, like, how much I agree with you there. And then also the second thing you mentioned is, yeah, my jiu-jitsu has gotten way better, and I'm not even doing the classes. Like, I'm just orchestrating the practice. I'm like, oh man, my focus and the things I'm like thinking about, my efficiency is way up. The things I can do is like, there's a marked improvement, even though I've been training like almost full time for like 18 years, so I should be like pretty good. But I feel like in the last like 2 years, I've gotten like way better in a lot of ways. Just like, yeah, just efficiency. I feel like my efficiency is, and that's me, not even, I watch my students like, oh, you guys are so much better than I was as a white belt 6 months in. And that's awesome for me, right? My goal is always to move shorter and shorter and shorter for my students. That's my external measure of, hey, am I in an environment, those type of things. Yeah, I just wanted to echo that because those are two things that are very important, and I see and realize myself. Man, Rory, we've talked about all sorts of things. Are the things you wanted to chat about that we didn't?
No, I didn't really come in here with any expectation. I just was hoping that, I was just hoping that I had something to offer. I don't, again, I've lived in the shadows, and I'm okay with that. I've ridden the coattails of one of the best coaches, in my opinion, in the game. 2 world champions, 21 black belts. We're 1 and 2, but 21 black belts, world champions. Is now on ecological dynamics. Adam just got published. I don't know if you guys discussed that when he was on, or if it was soon after that paper got published that he wrote with some people. It's just, so I don't always think of myself or take myself too seriously as a coach, but so I was just happy to get a chance to talk to you. Successful gym, successful programs, and maybe add something that I said that someone will listen to this and be like, oh, that makes sense. Here's this guy who's been doing this for a long time, and then he just made that change, and he's talking to a guy that only made the change a little while ago, and maybe there's something to this. And if there is, which I believe we agree, and Adam would agree, and Greg Satters would agree, and our friend Scotty would agree, that if there's something to be said about what we are doing after having done something for so long, maybe more people should look into it. Maybe it's not as scary as people think that it is. And if we are correct, yet, because again, there's still so much more of the other stuff for so many years, I can only just say anecdotally that in my room with my kids and my adults and myself, but if we are correct, then it really can change abilities, but it can almost be a change for everyone business wise. I am so much happier that I see people working hard for 60 minutes. That now, if I peek at in a class or I look at a camera and I see a coach talking too long and see people sitting around for too long, it makes me even angrier than it ever did. Like, get those people moving. We're here for all the reasons we're here for. All these people are here for all those reasons, but a big part of that is fitness, even though it might be not the most important part for everyone, but like, people should be getting a workout. Sitting around watching me do some shit for 5 minutes and then saying, hey, now go do this thing. That's not helping people. And the more time they're on the mats, the more time they're gaining all the other benefits, confidence and discipline and all the things that we want people to gain from martial arts. But they're actually learning how to grapple, like really grapple, not just learning how to build a Rolodex of moves and techniques. Hopefully these types of conversations, whether I added something to it or not, hopefully these are the types of conversations that get people to realize, all right, I don't have to reinvent the wheel, but there are other people that are doing this, so maybe I should try. And then if we're putting things out, you're putting things out and Greg is putting things out and people start to see how to do this, then we can benefit so many more people on this journey, which I believe is one of the most important journeys that someone can take. We use Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as that because everyone can do it and everyone wants to get punched in the face. But this is, I believe, the most important journey someone can take into martial arts, is stepping on a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu mat from 3-year-olds that we teach up until, the 50s and 60-year-olds. So people need to hear this over and over and over again so that they can hopefully make a change for their own schools and their own students.
Man, yeah, 100%. Man, Rory, I feel deeply in line with all your thoughts on this, man, for sure. And yeah, that was sort of my goal, was like just capture some conversations that aren't about converting people, but just about what's happening so people can see the experience. Because I think sometimes people are not worried, but it can seem like a hard thing to do, but it's just doing the thing, and it's just same way, just being able to hear this conversation makes it seem accessible, seeing the practices live, seeing those things, like, because I really believe like there's just so much benefit for your students. And if your students are truly as important as you say they are, you should be looking at what can I do to make their experience better. And I echo all that stuff you were saying there. Man, this has been sick, Rory. This hour and a half flew by, dude. It was
Good times.
wicked. Yeah.
Outstanding.
Man, maybe the perfect place to wrap is right here.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure, Bri. I appreciate you having me on. And hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again in the future. We'll have more more stuff to talk about, having done it for longer and longer, and really finally, again, we believe in it, so that's great. But I think the more we get into it and the more we see it, the more we can talk about it. And like I said, I'm not trying to convert anybody, but there are probably better ways to do things and worse ways to do things. And this just might be the better way to do it.
100%. I would definitely want to chat again. I think we
should
can
have
talk
both
about
of us
kids.
on. Can you do the
Yep.
Singer Brothers?
Yeah.
We do in the middle?
Let's do it.
Because
Yes,
that's a fun
please.
time. That's
Please.
a fun time.
That would be amazing. Because, yeah. Dude, fantastic. I'll stop this recording here, and then we'll just hang tight for a second so it uploads. Sick.